Welcome back, and back to our top story. President Trump planning to meet with Kim Jong Un in May of this year to discuss denuclearizing the North. Joining me right now to talk about the potential risks and rewards from such a sit-down, Ambassador John Bolton. He is a former U.S. ambassador to the United Nations, a senior fellow at the American Enterprise Institute, and a Fox News contributor. Great to see you, sir. Thanks very much for joining us.
Glad to be with you.
What do you think about this meeting?
Well, I think obviously the president's turned things on their heads as he does so often, and it's confused a lot of people in Washington. I think basically what he's saying, and he reiterated his thinking in his speech in Pennsylvania last night, is that with the North Koreans very close to achieving the objective they sought for so long of being able to target cities in the United States with nuclear weapons, it's time to cut through the usual diplomatic procedure and say we're prepared to talk right at the top. But I don't think this is the beginning of a 6-month, 9-month, 12-month process. I think this could actually could be a very short meeting, should be a very short meeting. The issue is, will North Korea denuclearize? And the way they can prove that is by agreeing to ship their nuclear weapons program to Oak Ridge, Tennessee, which is where, for example, the Libyan nuclear weapons program now sits. And if they're not willing to discuss that, there's not much to discuss.
Well, what are they willing to discuss, Ambassador? We've heard from them before in terms of saying we are not denuclearizing. We are not giving up our nuclear ambitions. Now, the administration will say the tough talk on the part of the president has actually brought them to the table to even consider it. Here's Stephen Mnuchin with me, the Treasury Secretary, this past week on Fox Business. Listen to this.
We believe that sanctions work. They worked in Iran. They've worked in North Korea. In my mind, one of the major reasons why they're coming to the table is because of the economic sanctions. And we're not going to change those sanctions. We will continue to put sanctions in place until they agree to fully denuclearizing the peninsula in something that we can hold them accountable for and verify.
Do you agree with that these sanctions have actually worked? Because some people say sanctions don't work. Why would a killer or someone who doesn't care about human rights care about sanctions?
Yeah, well, let me go back to the premise for a minute. I don't think Kim Jong Un wants to engage in the kind of conversation with the president I just described. He wants negotiations. He wants conventional, months of preparation, months of discussion at the lower levels to buy him time to finish the still uncompleted tasks to get that deliverable nuclear weapons capability. He's trying to throw sand in our eyes, and I think the president isn't falling for that. And I'd have to say, I think sanctions have played, at best, a minor role. What has Kim Jong Un's attention, that he has not had his attention or his father's, is the threat that we will use military force to destroy his nuclear weapons program. I think he's scared to death of that. I think he's scared to death that Donald Trump actually means what he says, unlike Barack Obama, who could say all options are on the table like he was brushing his teeth. He just didn't mean it.
Yeah, well,
I think now they know it's serious.
But by the way, the Chinese don't like the military THAAD system either in that part of the world. So talk to us about China and how they view this. They're out this morning in one of the state newspapers saying China will not be marginalized in any talks. You can attribute the good news that they are perhaps talking to China. So what's your take on China's involvement?
Well, basically, China's jived us for 25 years. They've said repeatedly they don't want North Korea with nuclear weapons, and they've done precious little to change that. They could eliminate Kim Jong Un's regime very easily. I think, frankly, it's in China's own national interest to see the Korean Peninsula reunited. I think we should be having talks on that. I wish we had started a long time ago. But I think it's time to tell China, when we say we want denuclearization, we mean we want it now. And let's be clear. The difference between our current situation and prior diplomatic efforts is technological. North Korea is very close to accomplishing what it's been after. CIA Director Mike Pompeo has used the phrase recently that they're a handful of months away. So elaborate diplomatic negotiations, toughening sanctions boat by boat by boat, isn't going to do the trick.
Yeah, you know, you raise an interesting point. I want to ask you about Iran and how Iran fits in here, but let me stay on this for a moment, because we just heard from Kevin McCarthy, the majority leader, who's saying, look, we need to look at China. Peter Navarro as well, saying China is stealing all of our intellectual property. They're going to come out with something, this administration, in terms of getting their arms around what China has been doing to America for so long, whether it be tariffs or what have you. What do you want to see in terms of this next couple of weeks, what's going to be coming out of this White House against China as it relates to tariffs?
Well, I think, frankly, we'd get their attention better on North Korea if we were tougher on their violations of their international trade obligations. Let's just take intellectual property. I think American and European companies would say virtually unanimously that any technology they put into China is at risk of being pirated. And yet for years we've let them get away with it. China has pursued a mercantilist policy within the WTO, and for far too long they haven't been called on it. I think you get China's respect when you stand up to them. I think as long as they think Americans can be pushed around on trade, they surmise, not illogically, we can be pushed around on other things, too.
How does Iran fit into this North Korea story?
Well, I'm very worried that it fits in and go in the other direction. I've been saying recently North Korea is part of the Middle East. I think the linkages between Iran's ballistic missile program and North Korea's are indisputable, and I think there's every reason to believe that they're closely working together on the nuclear side as well. And even if that's completely wrong, the fact is in Iran you have a relatively rich country seeking nuclear weapons technology. In North Korea you have a desperately poor country that has nuclear weapons technology. Any trouble seeing the structure of that transaction? That's why North Korea is a threat, not simply in Asia and the Pacific. It is a global threat. It will sell that technology to anybody with cash to buy it.
Real quick before you go, Ambassador, there is speculation that you may be offered a job in the White House, NSA director. Are you readying to take that job?
You know, I never discuss that subject. I'm very boring whenever the personnel issues get raised. It's a long-standing view of mine not to discuss it.
We don't think you're boring, Ambassador. It is good to see you, sir. Thanks very much for joining us.
Thank you very much.
All right, Ambassador John Bolton there.